Welcome inside another edition of Celtics Roundtable on CLNS Media. CLNS Media, the leading online provider of your Boston Celtics. A crazy Wednesday morning after news broke last night. We're coming to you right away. Myself alongside Matt Ignall, Celtics blogs, Alex Kungu, and our very own in a bunker somewhere, Sam Sheehan, coming at you the morning after the big news that shook the NBA. Kyrie Irving on his way to Boston in exchange for Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Ante Zizic, and the 2018 Brooklyn Nets pick. Sam, you look like you're at least prepared for this. Looks like you've been building for this. It looks like you were born for this. What is your thoughts coming out after we hear that Isaiah and Kyrie have swapped teams?
I mean, I got a routine for this sort of thing. I've lost 3 wives to divorce, so I went back to my same routine. I got my cigs, I got my pills. I'm ready to do this. I gotta say I'm not a fan of the trade. I think that my biggest problem with it, outside of just the emotional weight that Isaiah Thomas carries for what he did for this franchise, returning them to the playoffs and to relevance, quite frankly, over the past couple of years. On top of that, the Cavaliers had no leverage. They had no leverage. I'm not sure that anyone was ever going to beat a trade that was just Isaiah Thomas. And the Celtics needed to include Jay Crowder for salary reasons and maybe even another piece just to make that come together. But they definitely did not need to include the Brooklyn Nets pick. No one was... I just can't imagine that anyone was going to get value enough for Isaiah in the first place. The Cavs were caught between a rock and a hard place. The Eastern Conference team that is a biggest threat to the Celtics was drowning in the water, and they threw them a life raft. So I'm not feeling so hot right now. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more lukewarm on the deal. Just as is, I did think maybe just Thomas and Crowder and Zizic would have been enough. Like most of you guys, I'm very puzzled by why we included the Nets pick, but I also know that this is still very early. We don't necessarily know who else was bidding or how close like any other teams were. So just on its face as of today, this does look like the Celtics bid against themselves and maybe paid too much. It's possible that this could have been maybe like some reaction to how they, missed on Paul George because they wanted to wait a little longer and didn't want to like put all their chips on the table. But in terms of like who they got, just from a basketball sense, Kyrie Irving is a good player. It is debatable whether you would prefer him or Thomas. The Celtics are definitely taking a leap that in their system they could make Kyrie blossom into more of a complete basketball player. When you're not kind of shoehorned by LeBron James into like the role of a scorer, it's possible that, that there's a little bit to his game, and it seems that the Celtics are big believers in that, and they definitely want to explore that. So I'm not a fan of the value that we have to give up, but if Kyrie Irving takes another step and, he is already an elite offensive product, this could end up being not as bad of a deal as it appears right now.
Matt, do you have any positive feeling here?
It's tough. I was feeling good up until we heard that the Brooklyn pick unprotected was heading to Cleveland. I thought there was no way the Celtics were going to give that up in any sort of Kyrie Irving deal. But I guess Danny Ainge loves Kyrie Irving enough, so the Brooklyn unprotected. It's a major prize. It's probably what caused the deal to get done. It's definitely the biggest haul. Jay Crowder's no slouch either. He's going to help out the Cavs a lot. I think, the next few years. So, yeah, I'm not exactly thrilled with it, but, the Celtics did get a guy who's 25, who fits with the young core and kind of fits on the timeline. He's got an extra year on that contract. I think the Celtics are going to feel really good about Kyrie re-signing with them in 2 years. So, it does make sense. The Celtics did give up a ton to get Kyrie Irving, and it especially hurts when you think about the price that Jimmy Butler and Paul George and DeMarcus Cousins went for. Maybe you could argue that Kyrie Irving's a better asset than all those guys, but certainly not by this amount.
A couple of things that I think about when you think about this trade, and We talked about it a little bit pre-taping. What this says to me, at least I'm trying to put myself in Danny Ainge's point of view. And if you haven't heard Danny Ainge's thoughts immediately after the trade, make sure you go out to CLNS Media on our YouTube channel. We have Danny Ainge's full press conference via teleconference on CLNS Media. Check that out. But, if I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of Danny Ainge, like a couple of things stand out. One, they must not think Isaiah, from a health standpoint, is ready to go right now, and it still must be somewhat of a question mark when he's going to play this season, how effective he'll be, and how that translates to his future, not only in terms of like playing the court, but a monetary future as well. Like Isaiah's contract's coming up. We've talked about on this podcast ad nauseum about how he's an interesting case in terms of what do you pay Isaiah, and if he's hurt, like what do you do? So I get that they kind of get rid of that, not kick the can down the road. They just get rid of the can and throw it away and recycle it. That's one. Two, this also says to me that they must think the Brooklyn pick must be a little bit, less valuable in this year's draft, meaning like Brooklyn might actually have a better record than what some people currently think. Like, I think that the Brooklyn pick's going to fall in the top 5. It could be worse than that. They could have a better record than that with the way the East has gone. Like, you look at Atlanta, they're definitely worse. You look at Chicago, they're definitely worse. I just have a feeling the Knicks are going to try and get worse by trading Carmelo Anthony at some point. There are a lot of bad teams out East, and it gets a little convoluted at the bottom. Meanwhile, out West, you still have Phoenix, you still have LA. There'll be a surprise team out there that's not that great. So maybe that Nets pick falls at around 7 and not 1, 2, or 3 like we all sort of hoped for. That's the only way where if I'm sitting here today and I'm trying to justify this trade, it's like, well, Danny must think IT's never going to make a full recovery. They've maxed out their potential with Isaiah Thomas as a central piece, and that Brooklyn pick might not be as worthy of a trade chip as we all think. Maybe it's not as valuable as we all think. That's all I got. That's it. Otherwise, they traded the heart and soul of the team. They traded 2 guys, a big part of their culture, and it hurts because as a fan, you loved watching these guys. They restored some of the faith in Celtics basketball. Some of the things you love about Celtics basketball, those 2 guys are living, breathing acts of it. It just hurts to watch those 2 guys go away for a guy in Kyrie that we're not sure if he fits.
When is the Celtics title window? I'll throw that out there to Alex and Sheehan.
I mean, I think it kind of depends on, what kind of progress we see out of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. I mean, this was definitely something that played into this move, was the fact that Kyrie Irving is about 3 years younger than Isaiah. On top of, he's also taller. I think you could make the argument that Kyrie is, a little bit better of an isolation scorer. I'm of the opinion he's not the facilitator Isaiah is. And you could also probably argue that he's got a higher floor going forward. The Celtics are also going to save, if you think that they were going to max Isaiah next year, they save a lot of money. Now they'll probably only be a little bit into the tax versus way over it. So, I guess I'm not really sure what to make of that. Kyrie seemed really excited about the trade. Yeah, it was. And it sounds like he's going to resign there. So I think that, that to me kind of makes it seem like that the Celtics title window is going to be further down the road. They're gearing up for a more sustained, longer, deeper run. But at the same time, you also gave up, a Nets pick that could have helped with that. So, at the same time, it seems to have, while it pushed it forward, it also sort of, it's clear that the Celtics really believe in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Otherwise, they wouldn't have, taken away another bite at the apple that they probably didn't even need to put in the deal in the first place. I mean, I don't know, but they wouldn't have been so free and loose with that Nets pick acquiring Kyrie unless they thought that he was someone special that could really help with those young guys and right now. And, that they might already have those all-star players in Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum. So, I don't know. It seems to me like they sort of, while pushing it back, also might have shortened it a little, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because they lose one of the big pieces that would carry them forward, that Brooklyn pick. You'd think it'd get some sort of valuable player at that spot. And if you're getting rid of that asset, you do make your window a little bit smaller, I think, just by nature, because you have less one less controllable asset that could be a major focal point on the team. Like, you know how drafts go. You could have a draft where you pick the best guy in the draft 7th. Like, look at what the Mavericks did with Dennis Smith. Like, a lot of people are like, holy crap, did everybody pass on Dennis Smith and is he going to be the best player in this draft? And they got him at 9. So, yeah, that does make sense. It just feels like, the Celtics, who were they bidding against? You look at Phoenix, and like now we're talking about, in terms of Phoenix, like, oh, do they throw Josh Jackson in the deal? Well, of course they should. If they were looking at what the Celtics just gave up to go get Kyrie Irving, like Josh Jackson, Eric Bledsoe, pull the trigger. What are you waiting for? Look at what Denver could have offered around like Jamal Murray or Emmanuel Mudiay or Wilson Chandler or whatever the heck they wanted to offer. Like, yeah, all those pieces, if you look at what Boston just traded, like all those pieces should have been on the table. So, I just look at Boston and say, where were the suitors? And Matt made an excellent point of bringing out, like, look at what Jimmy Butler went for. Look what Paul George went for. Look what DeMarcus Cousins went for. And now look what Kyrie went for. And it's very different in terms of what Cleveland was able to get. So hats off to Cleveland for getting what they got. But you look at Boston and say, like, of all the times to overpay, you chose not to overpay for Boogie Cousins. I sort of applaud that. Didn't overpay for Jimmy Butler. That makes somewhat sense. Paul George, a little maybe less sense. You overpay for Kyrie Irving? Does it make a lot of sense in comparison to everything else? I thought it was a brilliant point by Matt.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Danny's been doing this for a while, and I think it's still continuing the same path where he's honestly just keeping his options open. If Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum make a leap right now, Kyrie Irving turns to the player that they want to, Gordon Hayward works out, they could be contending just as we expected them to before this deal. But also, they do have the option where they still have that Lakers pick. They do still have these young players that are still developing, that if it needs to take a few years down the road, they still have those avenues open. I do think an interesting part about trading Jay Crowder was now you kind of are giving these, draft picks their time to play now. There's going to be more minutes now for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And I think part of the whole thing about, it's not just about acquiring lotto picks, you also have to give them, room to grow and room to expand into new roles. And I think the Celtics, in that sense, they definitely did give their new wings some more space to them to grow into new roles. So it's, it's still time, though. We don't know how Jason Tatum is going to react to playing, like big minutes or having a bigger role. We don't know if Jaylen Brown is going to turn into a lockdown defender. So a lot of it is still, like, we don't really know. There's no clear answers yet because we're relying on players that are so young and we're relying on players to make leaps that we haven't seen. But there is a chance for that stuff to happen where they could be contenders or they could have to kick it way down the line. But they do have now the option because with Kyrie's age, you do kind of have that kind of expanded timeline in a sense where even if it's not right now, these next 2 or 3 years, you have the opportunity to sign into an extension and you still have, 5 more years with Tatum and Brown still growing. So
right.
Yeah. I think
you're right that it's Jaylen Brown's and Jason Tatum's time to shine. But you know who's always shining? Whose time is always shining? It's Audible. Today's show is brought to you by Audible.com, the leading provider of premium digital spoken audio information and entertainment on the internet today. Audible content includes unmatched selections of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, and business information providers. Simply download and listen to to Audible.com on your iOS device, Android, and more. Audible is different because their collection of exclusive originals, short stories, and comedy, plus the best of news, podcasts, and more, handpicked and continuously refreshed. You can share a book from your library with anybody, and it comes with speed control, and it's a great way to get content on the go. And Audible is now offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audible.com/CelticsBeat and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download the title, again, for free, Audible. It's that easy. Go to audible.com/CelticsBeat to do so for a 30-day free trial and a free audio handbook. Does any one of you guys think the Celtics are better today than they were yesterday?
I think it's possible that in the playoffs, like we know Kyrie Irving's he's proven in the playoffs So it's possible that the upgrade to Irving kind of outweighs losing a guy like Jay Crowder. So it's possible. I would probably bet against it though.
I I think that what you have to remember about this Celtic squad is just the raw turnover and how fast it's happening. The Celtics were getting their wing minutes from Avery Bradley, Marcus Smart, and Jay Crowder last year, primarily, with Terry Rozier hitting some spot and Gerald Green and stuff. Most of those guys are gone, and Smart, probably ideally should be playing, some sort of guard or off guard. Isaiah Thomas was great off ball, and we saw him and Smart work really well together. We're going to see if Kyrie is able to do that. And I just think that, to sort of tie it back to Alex's point, I think, a big part of this team is going to be how ready Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are. You're leaning awfully hard on a rookie, and rookies are very rarely good. You have to be
it's not just for this year,
rookie.
Sam. It's for next year and the year after that. So, I mean, if their development comes along the right way and Kyrie Irving takes another step forward and maybe either they trade Horford or Horford doesn't decline and Hayward, takes another step forward in the Celtics offense. I mean, I think we're looking at it the title window, a couple years down the road from now, maybe.
Right. I get that, but I'm just saying when you look at development wise, I'm gonna keep banging this drum. People don't understand how good Jay Crowder was, and they I blame certain former Boston sports talking heads attributing their father and him to the Jay Crowder backlash, but he was very, very good. And Jaylen Brown was the bottom of plus minus last year for the team. He played very well with the starters, but he was absolute bottom in plus minus. So yeah, as good as he's looked, we still really haven't seen it from him. We've seen the flashes, but we haven't seen it consistently night in and night out. And all of a sudden he's probably starting for you. And Jason Tatum is going to be playing a lot of those wing minutes. I know people are excited about Semi Ojeleye, but you don't want to go that deep, looking for wing minutes behind Gordon Hayward. So I don't know. I'm concerned that I don't think the Celtics are better. I think that they're more versatile going forward. But I would be very careful, and I would manage my expectations if you're someone who's expecting Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum to be in all-star conversations next year.
And yeah, I do.
Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead, Alex.
I was just gonna say I do think there's a very big chance that they can actually be better. I don't think it'll show up in the regular season per se, because I think where you'll see them be better if they are better would be in a playoff situation, because they have a lot more guys now who can get out and get their own bucket now, not just with Irving and Hayward, but also even on a smaller level, a guy like Marcus Morris and Jason Tatum. They do have a lot more of a complete team now in terms of they're kind of more of a modern NBA team now with a lot of wings that can move up and down positions. Brad can do a lot of different things. So there's a scenario where all of these pieces come together and work. They all buy into the system, and they just end up being a really good team. And even though, Irving is also a very, bad defender, but I don't think he's the same bad as Isaiah Thomas, where you have to immediately build an entire defense around him. And I think in a playoff situation where you don't have to worry as much about Isaiah Thomas all the time, and you can kind of focus on your own man and stuff like that, and maybe you're a little bit more comfortable with switching defenses and stuff like that, you see the Celtics end up being a more well-rounded team. So there is a chance, but again, it does again come back to relying on guys like Jaylen Brown. You're also relying on Marcus Smart to an extent, and Jason Tatum, maybe even Terry Rozier a little bit. Those are young guys. Those are guys that are going to be inconsistent, and you just never know what you're going to get from them. And history says that you shouldn't rely much. So like Sam said, you have to have tempered expectations, but there's obviously a scenario in which they could end up being a better team than last year.
Glad you brought up Terry Rozier, because he's now the second longest tenured Celtic.
It's quite impressive. Matt, are they better today or are they better yesterday?
I'll say better yesterday, but I think it's not definitively answered. I mean, at least Kyrie Irving's healthy, right? So I guess they are better today then. But obviously this is fundamentally a bet on Kyrie Irving, and probably Kyrie Irving being a member of the next Celtics championship team. He's not super young. He's 25. He's probably got another good maybe 5, 6, 7 years ahead of him if he manages to stay injury free. So the Celtics will have quite a few cracks at there. It just feels like the way I think about it is that at least that 2018 Brooklyn pick, it represented a chance at getting like a transcendent talent type player. And even if it was unlikely, that chance was out there. And the Celtics, it was very least going to be like a very good player. And the Celtics really damaged their chances of acquiring that type of guy. They're kind of going with a different model, I think, in order to build a contender, unless you get like a serious, perhaps unexpected leap from guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum or Kyrie Irving. They have a lot of really good players, and again, I think we've talked about this to death, but if their younger players can really step up over the next couple of years, I think there is a path to win a title. So this could very well play out well for the Celtics, and they could get a title or two. But I just feel like they may have just lowered their ceiling a little bit and probably hurt themselves in the 20s decade because they traded that Brooklyn pick.
I understand that. I think they're in terms of how good they're going to be, we'll have to see some developments. I think you're all right, but I think if on paper today, I don't think they're as good as they were yesterday. Now that is dependent on a couple of different things. But one of the things that if you always think about it in terms of like this type of direction, what would Bill Belichick do? Because Belichick has created this, and I hate to bring in another sport into this, but it kind of helps a little bit, right? So Bill Belichick, who is like the mastermind of the Patriots dynasty for the past 15 years, he probably would have traded Isaiah Thomas right now because of, as some people have said, this might be the best you'll ever see of Isaiah. And if the best you'll ever see of Isaiah can't beat a LeBron James team, and can't get past the Cavaliers and the Warriors, then you need to change things up. So there's that value. But there's always this other thing that Michael Lombardi talks about of The Ringer, and he always talks about how Belichick always deals from a position of strength, okay? Now, if you look at what strengths the Celtics have, they have a bunch of wing players that seem to be interchangeable at their peaks if you were to extrapolate data. Now they don't obviously have that right now, but there's some things that head in that direction that make Jay Crowder trading him a little bit easier because you have wing depth. You have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, Marcus Morris, Shemi Ojeleye, Gershon Yabusele. I know a lot of those guys are unproven, but at least you have bodies, right? With Isaiah Thomas, you replace him with another guy who's very similar in terms of style of play. You still have Marcus Smart. You still have Terry Rozier. So you lose a ball handler and gain a ball handler. And they have a bunch of draft picks. So they trade from that particular position of strength to acquire somebody that could potentially bring them to the next level. Now, I don't like to trade at right now. I have to have some time to think about this and process this and watch Kyrie a lot more and get involved with what he does. But I see the obvious peak of Kyrie Irving at 25, what would he look like in a couple of years under Brad Stevens? We don't know. So I understand why they did it. I get the trade in terms of dealing from a position of strength. It just hurts to see Isaiah go and Jay go, a part of a team that really did a lot of really special things.
How cold is Danny Ainge? Isaiah balled out for this team. He gave everything to this Celtics team, to the organization, and just to see him get traded away, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that not to kind of go, but I think that that's exactly why you can't really bring in the what would Bill Belichick do into the NBA, because in the NBA players just have way more power than they do in the NFL.
True.
And you cannot
But
you
for
hope
managing
the Celtics,
but you have to manage personnel, right? I mean, I know
right.
chemistry and players like personalities plays a part, but if
Right.
if your job is to manage personnel, if you think Kyrie Irving is going to be a better player in 2 years than Isaiah Thomas, then you have to take that risk.
I mean, yes, but you're also, other players are looking at this. You know what I'm saying? They saw what you just did to Isaiah Thomas, like, and
Yeah, the Celtics are capped out though.
they're capped out for now. But I'm assuming Danny Ainge will still have a job in 5 or 10 years, hopefully.
He's gambling with that.
Yeah, but I guess that's just what I'm saying. Like, on top of it just being ice cold, like Game of Thrones, like that's also just you can't underestimate free agents in the NFL. Big free agents don't have the same impact they do in the NBA. Like a free agent in the NBA can literally just change the shape of a conference, and you are maybe gambling some of your goodwill real estate when you do this to your star player who was on an undermarket contract for 3 years, never complained, never did anything, never demanded a trade, and never they had the money to
he only asked to back up the bridge
him.
truck up every once in a while. Like
right, but
he asked for money. It's like, pay me finally, and the Celtics said no, we don't have to because you're still under contract.
Well, and he deserved. But the thing is, he deserved it, and the thing is that I just hope that the Celtics know what they're doing from that perspective of the political ramifications down the road. Hopefully they don't need them. Hopefully all these things pan out and it's great. But people remember that. Players have a lot of power. Players have more power in the NBA, I would say, than any other sport.
Alex, do you have any rant for us on this?
I mean, I'm not sure I buy into that as much because a lot of people said the same thing about the Sixers when they were doing their whole tanking things, like, oh, our players going to go there to look at their culture. And then now you look 2 years down the road, like J.J. Redick is happy to be there. They're signing all these vets, and they're like,
$23 million gives you a lot of reasons to love being there or whatever.
Yeah.
J.J. Redick got. He's got an absurd contract.
That is a fair point. But I do think, like, in general, time does kind of heal all. Right now, it looks like, the Celtics are just ice cold. They're just giving up players that were not even like the heart and soul of the team. Like Isaiah Thomas was like literally recruiting Gordon Hayward this summer, and then now all of a sudden he's gone. Like, it's crazy. But I do think, a year or two go down the road, it's not like we're going to have any space to sign any max players. Like, if everything works out the way it's supposed to work out, they're really kind of relying a little bit out of a lot of members on this core. And I think for the most part, players will know this is business already. Like, this whole movement about, like, I'm a free agent, I get to pick where I want, like, having choices. Players already have this assumption that this is who management is, in a sense. So I don't really think that this is going to make players think that now more than they thought it before. So it was definitely a big move for fans. I think we feel it more than I think players do from that standpoint, because, like, for us, we get emotionally connected to these guys. We get emotionally connected to their performances. But you don't pay players contracts for what they did in the past. You pay them for what they're doing in the future. And I don't think Isaiah Thomas was someone that the Celtics looked at and think 4 years down the road, he's going to be putting up the same production. So they made the best move for them. And whether it works or not is to be seen. But, like, I would rather prefer a front office that was forward thinking and not being stagnant, just okay with being like a doormat to the Cavaliers, as opposed to, like, going out and trying to win and understanding where you are.
Right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Celtics Roundtable. Make sure you stay tuned for more from us. We'll have more reaction as more news comes out about the Kyrie Irving trade. If you're watching us on YouTube, do 2 things. Number 1, hit that like button, smash that like button right there, and subscribe to CLNS Media. If you're listening to us on the go, subscribe to the Boston Celtics news feed, available on your favorite podcast app, Stitcher, iTunes, whatever, or you can download the CLNS Radio mobile app. It's an excellent place to get all of our stuff, featuring stuff from Bob Ryan, the Bob Ryan podcast, Grant's podcast, and more. Give the Boston Celtics newsfeed on iTunes a 5-star review if you can. Give us some constructive feedback. Make fun of Sam Sheehan. I don't care. Whatever you want to do. Have fun, but 5-star review would be really awesome. Follow us on Twitter at CLNS Roundtable. And we're now on Celtics blog, so find all our videos there and give some comments in the comment section. You guys know how it goes on YouTube. Get weird in the comment section. We love that stuff. You'll get a plug from us in multiple outlets if you get really weird with it. I want to thank my guys here to give a little quick reaction. We have Alex Kungu of Celtics blog, Sam Sheehan down to the bunker, and our producer, co-host extraordinaire, Matt Ignall, coming on this show. I'm Evan Valenti. We'll see you next time, coming at you with more Kyrie Irving news on Celtics Roundtable, a part of CLNS Media.
Good luck to those commenters trying to find something to make fun of. I look cool as hell.